Kathline Chery of Calce Wine Cooperative. We have Chenoa Ashton-Lewis of Ashanti Wines, and we have Renfro of the 280 Project. So basically what we're hoping to cover during this panel, we are going to be talking about, the ephemeral nature, using natural components to make healthy wine, aromatized wines, using what grows around us as base ferments as medicine, and, the contributions of our ancestors. So I will let y'all take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Justine. Thank you so much. I am so excited for this panel. I am flanked by the people that I look up to most in this industry. So thank you guys for the work that you do and allowing us to do the work that we do. This panel, just before we get into it, was really inspired by a conversation that I was having with Chenoa about nursing your ferments and addressing them when they're sick. Ferments are alive and breathing, and sometimes things happen. And we're all pretty aligned with the natural wine community, for better or worse. And sometimes, in order to call ourselves natural, we don't give our wines medicine, which just seems silly. Nature has a remedy for everything. It's beautiful, it's amazing, it's the creator's gift. So why are we not utilizing everything in nature's bounty to make sure that we put out the most delicious creative expression of our land and of ourselves? So I just want to give a big shout out to you for that. Let's kick off with our first point, which is really, I think, when talking about elixir of life, we're starting in land, and there's been a lot of talk about regeneration, specifically in the natural wine community. I think that we're at the point where we're now seeing biodynamic face creams, which means we're really somewhere. But if we want to talk about our ancestry, and if we want to talk about rooting, we have an expert over here on George Washington Carver, arguably one of the best regenerative farmers of this land. And he's ours. So I just want to shout him out and give Chris the space to share how this work has impacted you and influenced you.
Let's see. I would say the work that we all do collectively, for me, is inspiring, because working in the industry prior to this, it didn't feel like a safe space. It didn't seem fun, besides getting kind of fucked up all the time. So being out in nature and putting it all back together, getting to actually do farming with making ferments, makes it like a full picture. Plus, when you're around people that you trust and love and stuff like that, it just really does. It puts the puzzle all together. But yeah, George Washington Carver, people like that came before me, other Black farmers, indigenous farmers, people from all over the world that have been taking care of their land, feeding themselves off the land, foraging, whatever it is. I feel like that's real medicine. And people are starting to think of food as medicine. They're starting to think of drinking as a way to actually make yourself feel better, rather than just getting fucked up all the time. So yeah, I think it has kind of a lot of just moving parts. But if you really think about taking care of the earth, taking care of your body, taking care of your community, it's all the same thing. It all tastes good. It all feels good. It all does good stuff for the earth. And yeah, I don't know. I'm really happy to be here.
Chris, I'm just going to ask you just to follow up real quick. I think sometimes we are reluctant to define something because we don't want to be held to it. I think that regeneration is one of these things. And I'm just curious, especially in reference to George Washington Carver's work, how you think of regenerative agriculture, and if you pulled anything specifically from that work that was done.
Okay, so touching on that, I think as a kid and, as an adult now, same thing, putting pieces together. Like as a kid, George Washington Carver, he was always just the peanut butter guy in most books, but the books that my mom bought me, I got to see him as an actual botanist, as a scientist who was able to make products out of plants, out of plant materials that had multiple uses. So same thing, the way he saw the earth, I feel like he was very in touch with the spirit of our planet and paid attention to how the forest works. And the forest already does everything perfectly. So he noticed that a tree falls down, it decomposes, that the mycelium, the mycorrhizal life, all that stuff comes into work. Things start eating, bugs start eating things, food, decomposes, turns into food for the earth. From the forest, take it into a vineyard, take it into a farm, and feed the soil. So he was thinking about feeding the soil, like the forest already feeds itself in a certain way. So how do we keep our farmland doing that? So when he was going and helping farmers that looked like him, but also people that didn't like him because of his race, he was trying to share that knowledge of like, hey, don't you see that we're all on the same planet, that we're all going through the same shit, that we all could starve to death, but if we actually just take care of it together and use these simple methods of like crop rotation, feeding the soil, not stripping it, that you basically can have a diverse ecosystem, healthy plants that keep going.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think that a common thought that keeps popping up, and it was popping up as you were speaking, is this idea of being holistic. This idea of plant medicine, natural medicine, things growing around you that are good for you. And some of the work that Kathleen does, some of the work that Calche does really champions aromatized wines. And that has a place not only in wine, but also medicinally. And I think you were kind of touching on that when we were talking about passion fruit a little bit, plants as medicine. So I'm wondering how you use glucose alongside grapes in order to improve upon your ferments, but also maybe to keep them healthy.
Yeah, so when I'm adding botanicals to ferments I'm making, it's really for first, it's like a sensory pleasurable thing. I'm like, oh, this smells so good. I made a piquette with apples, it was apple hummus and some white grapes and tulsi underneath hyssop. And just like first smelling it, I was like, this tulsi is like super floral. It's gonna go nice with the apples. The anise hyssop is gonna add like a nice little licorice, little bitterness to it. And I think that's kind of like the first allure of plants. It's just like a pleasurable thing. But then I think as humans, we found that it was also like really good for us. This can aid us in our digestion and like helping us feel better. And yeah, I think it's just like this circle of life. The plants, like, they want to thrive and survive, and so they entice us, we eat them, and then we plant more of them, and then it just like we just are like co-creating our world together. Because yeah, we need all the medicines that we have there derived from some kind of plant. And fermentation is just like a way of breaking down. It's like a pre-digestion to the food or the drink that we're consuming. And yeah, it's just like eating us all the way all together.
I want to follow up on that a little bit. Aromatized wines, you find them everywhere. Co-ferments and aromatized wines are arguably some of the first commercialized wines, not commercialized in the modern sense, but if we think about the Phoenicians and the ports and going around, if you think about Retsina, that is resin that has been used to stabilize wine. And I'm wondering, just kind of as the artist that you are with flavor, you also have a very technical mind on how to keep wine stable. And I'm wondering, how those botanicals, if you will, help with ferments kind of staying where they're supposed to be, or preserving them, if you will.
Okay. I don't know if I think along those lines, but there's, I guess later on I'm doing a workshop on Florida water, and I was trying to find a way. It's like a honey-based wine, and doing that naturally, honey doesn't want to break down all these. There's lots of things that go into it, but a way to stabilize it naturally. I found that like lime zest, it contains like the nutrients that the ferment needs to go on. If we don't use that, a lot of people use like an actual, it's like this black box nutrient mix, like nobody really knows what's in it. So sure, lime's not like an herb, but it contains the things that the ferment needs. Yeah, so that's how I can speak to that.
Awesome. Yeah, and with all of this, and with this panel, Elixir of Life, and we'll continue this point in a moment, but really trying to drive in the point that humans, plants, and ferments have all kind of evolved together, and have all played a role in each other's survival. And this wine thing that we're talking about that has become increasingly more acute and exclusive, without it, there's a chance that none of us would be here. So it belongs to all of us, whether you come from Europe, North America, South America, Africa, the Caribbean. We all have a fermented culture that is interwoven with our people. And just because we're here doesn't mean that we should be forced to abandon that knowledge and that know-how. Yeah, and with that, I think sometimes we tend to stay within our own communities, especially in natural wine, and are afraid sometimes to take advice from people who others don't deem natural enough or hands-off enough. And I personally think that it's a major flaw of our industry, and it's really closed-minded. And I just want to give Chenoa the space to talk about your experience in your ferments, nursing, and specifically about with somebody who had a lot of conventional kind of chemical knowledge. I'm thinking specifically of like the bees pollen and those kind of nutrients, and just that kind of collaborative space where you can take somebody who has so much chemical knowledge and then hone in on that compound and find it in nature, naturally occurring, making holistic one.
So this conversation kind of started from how we, Will and I first started making wine at the Chery winery, which was very 0-0, nothing added at all in the whole process. It's just grapes. And then after that, in 2021, we switched to a new winery in Sebastopol, which has 20 different winemakers there. We are definitely the most radical out of everyone, and we're like those kids that we like enjoyed classical music, but we were more into punk rock anyways. And so we came into the space, and everyone's doing wine in different ways, but a lot of them are the ways that we had never been taught before. It was very interesting because that was all very clinical and scientific, and a lot of them had come to Davis, where ours was very much ancestral, because that's how Tony had learned from his grandfather, and he just passed that down onto us. But within changing spaces, we're gaining a lot of different information from both sides, which was very helpful. And there are moments where we've learned a lot and grown a lot, and where we've had to challenge new mentors and friends and colleagues on the harder fits in the longer game, which obviously will cost you more money. And so I'll talk about two examples. The first one, I guess we will call the double bump. We had issues with the wine from 2020 with a lot of VA in it. And so there's a lot of different routes you can go with adding chemicals to it, but that's still not our philosophy. And when we talked to our colleague and someone that was helping us at this new space, he was like, well, what you can do is you can wait until the next year and then take fresh fermenting skins from the following harvest and put juice on top of that, fermented together. and then pump off the juice, and that will really help dissolve it, and you'll have new yeast to be eating up the volatility of it. And that was like a long drawn out conversation. Is more the concise version of it, and that was also something that we had. This wine was from 2020. We just did this in 2022, so it took us 2 years to resolve a wine, and it's still not perfect, but it did actually work. And that was just a very natural addition. I was literally using the yeast from a following harvest. And it's amazing, but also the long game that you have to play in when you're doing it the way we are. But there's something fascinating about using this just natural organic nutrients that exist there. So that was a really, we just finally did that this year, and it was really amazing to kind of see the effects of that. It does not nearly have the same amounts of VA that it started with. And the second thing that we've done, an example where we've added bean nutrients is from the Ojalá, the Sauvignon Blanc. That was a wine that got stuck at 5 bricks, and it was there for many, many months. We started to stir the leaves, we put it out in warmth, and we had read this study that in Spain, Spanish winemakers were doing, where they were adding bee pollen to certain fermentations that yeast were crapping out. When yeast were on their death row, they had found that bee pollen would help the yeast finish out the fermentation, especially when the alcohol is coming into play. And so we added this very small amounts. They had full study where if you add over 2 tablespoons, the effect doesn't start to work as well. And so we added this, and we stirred our Sauvignon Blanc every day, and then we added some fermented apple juice as well, which is a nice tool to have when fermentations get stuck, especially where we are located, because we are very close to an organic apple orchard and press, and they store apples. Apples can be stored in cold storage for a very, very long time. And so we added these elements, and this is the most quantity that we've ever made in any wine, and that's very terrifying and definitely like a risk when you think of just the monetary factor of that. And after a month, the wine went completely dry. It's like each day it's like drops 0.1, 0.2, and you're like just cheering it on. And it's so fascinating to watch. It's just like growing and evolving. You're like, okay, this is working. That was our first time we had read it, but we'd never actually used it before, and hadn't really talked to other winemakers about it. And that pollen, we went to the farmer's market. There was an organic honey guy that we'd gone to get honey from, and he also had pollen, which has beneficial nutrients effects to humans as well. It's used quite a bit, and just kind of expanding off of what you just said, it's like, so plants, humans have this relationship also, and also what they are able to give to us as well. And that was really kind of an incredible experience to see that actually holistic picture come together between humans, bees, and plants.
Thank you. I want to pull a couple points. If whoever wants to pick up on them, you're welcome. Not to get too geeky, because we do have a fermentation workshop, but y'all keep talking about nutrients. I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit, especially within the context, this is about elixir of life. This is about ferment's kind of place in the human story, and if these nutrients that are needed for ferments actually make them more beneficial upon consumption. I don't know if anybody knows this. Second thing that I've noticed is apples keep popping up. This is ABV, and I'm going to say apples are everywhere in these co-ferments. And I'm curious, not why apples, because we're just going to throw it out that apples are a heritage plant and grow just about everywhere in the US. And the fact that cider is not everywhere should really make us question what's going on. But how y'all use apples within your ferments. I sell the Ojalá, and I did not know there was apple juice in there. That's so dope. And those are 2 points that I kind of want to raise and see how you feel about it.
Just to speak to the nutrient thing a little bit, and kind of saying the same thing a little bit of like fermentation is like digesting something a little bit for us, and like with why sourdough bread is it's better for us than commercial yeast, like a Wonder Bread. It's breaking down the kernel of the grain so that our bodies, like a little bit before, so our bodies can do the rest of it. I think that with plants, like you can't just go up and pick up a leaf, you know, and eat it like that. And when we're adding whatever kind of plant, whatever kind of nutrient into a ferment, that's like breaking it down, I think, for us in a way that's better. An example, elderberry. I didn't know it is not, you shouldn't like eat them raw. And I guess especially in large quantities, I think one might be okay, but like they do grow at a vineyard that I manage, and so I harvested a bunch, and I was like, oh, it's gonna taste great in this wine. And I was just gonna like add that again, and it's like speaking to some people that know more than I do, and they're like, yeah, you should probably either cook it down a little bit before you add it in, or like get it going like at the beginning of the fermentation, so it's really breaking down throughout the whole process. And so obviously then we can consume it in a safe way. Yeah. And we want to be safe with these things, especially. Yes.
Yeah, I see apples everywhere. In San Francisco, I feel like I see apples over everybody's backyard. And I just ask, I like to take free fruit as much as possible. So that's why I use apples. The property Filoli, where the wines on the table are from, has like over 200 different varieties of heirloom apples. So it's fun to just taste through them. Some are juicier than others. Some are way tart, unedible. But yeah, they're interesting. Yeah, there's weird stuff like medlars and all kinds of crazy stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I find apples to be, at this point, I kind of don't even eat them anymore. Like I chew them and then spit them out. But yeah, it's weird. It's like I don't swallow them that much. Yeah.
I'm kind of the same after eating, but it's more I can't buy it. I eat store-bought apples after like have it off the tree. You're like, oh, I can't. I'm just gonna have to wait till next year. But where I live in West Sonoma County, it's orchard territory. They're everywhere, and there's so many also just abandoned ones because we are more focused on vines out there. But I have found we use apples in a lot of our fruit co-ferments, and then it helped our Ohala finish fermentation. But I found such a great resource to have, and they're also fairly inexpensive when you think about grapes, and then also the fact that there are so many abandoned lots within Sebastopol and West County because that's not the main focus there. I think it's a really actually great way for someone that is interested in getting into winemaking, wants to do these small projects. I think apples is actually a great way to get into this introduction of that. There's like far more accessibility for it, and also it just allows you. I found that apples have been great for other fruit co-ferments, like something like what we have on the table is apricot, plum, and apples, and the amount of apricots and plums you forage wasn't enough, and so apples the apple juice is light and will fairly it will let you. It's like French Colombard. It will have acid and it will have its own characteristics, but also allows other fruits characteristics to show through it, which is why I really enjoy it. And we do apple and grape co-ferments as well. But it allows you to up a volume of something if you can't really get as much of it, but you want to work with these fruit trees that are in your neighborhood and you only can get whatever 10 pounds of them, but you really want to make a wine out of it and need more abundance. As apples is a great route to go, and there are places where you can go and just get organic unpasteurized apple juice and have it ferment.
Yeah, I think touching on that, people don't really give grapes away for free, but they give apples away for free. So I think that's when you're starting out making wine or making a beverage, I feel like cider is a fun thing to get into because it's a little bit weird, funky, and I think that's also what I like about working with apples is that you can go all over the board, barnyardy to super fresh and sweet, like actual apple juice. Some taste like that, like you were saying. But yeah, I think they have a bigger range than grapes sometimes, depending on what you're working on.
I think that's a really great place to leave off. I really appreciate that you touched on the accessibility of apples, not only in availability, but also in price. I think a lot of what we are fighting against is the cost of entering into this industry, the perceived cost of being a winemaker. And it actually doesn't cost much if you are not fixed on this idea of making a Cabernet that is fermented and then put into French oak. Again, fermentation has evolved along with us. We haven't always had access to industry in this way. And they also grow everywhere. So you do not have to be of means and have a vineyard in your backyard to make some apple wine. So thank you guys. Thank you. This is Chris from 280. Here,